Entrepreneurs and small business owners, are you feeling overwhelmed by lack of capital, growth challenges, or personal branding? You are not alone. UCS Advisors is here for you. We're professional capital raising advisors committed to helping you secure funding and grow your business. Are you ready to impress investors? Check your investor readiness with our free 45-second quiz at ucsquiz.com. We believe in you. Visit ucsquiz.com and start your success journey. And remember, always be willing to achieve your greatness.
We're so happy to announce our brand new partnership with the New Jersey Lottery. As their slogan goes, anything can happen in Jersey, and that is so true. Welcome to Greetings from the Garden State, powered by the New Jersey Lottery. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Greetings from the Garden State. I'm your host, Mike Cam. We are here in Camden, New Jersey today on the Battleship, New Jersey with Ryan Szimanski. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me down and us doing an episode on this awesome battleship. I was just like walking around while I was waiting for it. It's just like, it's almost too impressive to put into words, like when you're standing on the deck of something like this and then being able to kind of walk around and interact with all this stuff. It's pretty wild, but you get to come to work here every day. That's pretty cool.
Every day,
Yeah. So what's that like? Well, let's do this first. Let's tell the people like what your role here at Battleship New Jersey is.
So I'm the museum's curator.
Okay.
And the museum curator is usually in charge of things like the exhibits and the artifacts that people donate. What makes a museum ship unique is that the ship itself is one of the artifacts that has been donated to the museum for us to keep in the public trust.
Yeah.
So modifications to the ship, maintenance to the ship, things like that also go through my office so that we can maintain the historical accuracy and significance of different parts of the ship.
Yeah, that's really cool. And how does one get into something like that? Were you like always involved in museums and different things like that? Or is the ship more kind of like the direction that the trajectory you were on to get here?
So there are about 170 museum warships around the world that, at least that are part of the Historic Naval Ships Association. And we're a mix of people. Some people come from a naval background or a maritime background. Some people come from a more museum or history background.
Gotcha.
I've always been interested in the history of warships, the Pacific War, things like that. Grew up on that. And when I was 16, my parents told me that I needed to get out of their house and get a job. Fortunately, there was a museum ship like this one not too far from home.
Yeah.
I'm from Baltimore originally.
Okay, cool. Well, you got a lot down there near like Annapolis and all that, I would imagine.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I worked for Historic Ships in Baltimore, which has a number of ships, and spent about 12 years there before I got the job up here.
Cool.
So I've got a regular undergrad degree in history. I've done a little bit of extra work on curatorial stuff, but really it is the work I've done on museum ships that gave me the experience to come here.
Very cool. And you've been doing this particular job for how long?
I've been here with the Battleship, be going on 6 years now.
Okay, cool. So you obviously know, like I said before off mic, more than most about this ship, I would imagine, right?
And, in terms of historians, the
Sure,
guys who actually served on here.
Of course, I'm sure they know, a lot, but like the ins and outs of everything. But I think that's so cool. And so, obviously something that you're really into, and then being able to show up here to work every day and just be on a ship like this, like that's got to be insane.
This is my dream job.
Yeah.
I can't believe I got to this point in my career in my late 20s. Like, where do I go from here?
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay, so we're going to learn a little, obviously, we're here. We're going to learn a little bit about the history of the ship first. We're going to learn a little bit about if people do come down here and visit, what they can expect, like what they can see, different things. We'll almost kind of do like a mini, almost like virtual tour, but just audio, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then we'll talk about like some future plans for the battleship and all that. So when was this giant ship built?
So she was built between 1940 and 1943. Before the United States even got into World War II, they started designing the ship because, of course, World War II is already going on in Europe.
Yeah.
We know that we need to start updating our military at that point. And From the day that the keel was laid on this ship, she was serving her country. This is one of the many projects that helped put Americans back to work coming out of the Great Depression.
Yeah. Where was this built at? Sorry.
Not too far from where we're sitting today. So it
Okay.
was built at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, right across the river from Camden, New Jersey.
Gotcha. That's really cool. And so you said how long this took to build? 3 years?
Yeah, just
About 3 years?
3 years, which is wild for a ship this large.
Yeah. I also heard you said a ship this large, but when I was milling around out on the deck, one of the gentlemen out there mentioned that this is the longest battleship ever built. Is that true too?
Yeah, so the U.S. Navy designed a series of ships to all look the same. They're called the Iowa-class battleships. It costs so much to design something this big that you don't just build one of them.
For sure. Yeah.
So they were the longest battleships ever designed, and for whatever reason, this one ended up about 3 inches longer than any of her sister ships.
Huh.
It's paper blueprints, or you don't have the digital CAD stuff.
Yeah.
Which means that the designers, sometimes a pipe went through a wall here in one room and came out over here in the other room according to the blueprints.
Yeah.
So the guys in the shipyard, the builders, had to reconcile those things. And the ones who built the ship here in Philadelphia did it a little bit different from the guys who built the sister ships up in New York.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. It's got to be crazy too. Like, obviously, like you mentioned, World War II is going on at that time in Europe, and the United States is like, we gotta get ourselves ready, and they built something like this to get themselves ready. Like that's, and especially like in that era, because I feel like a lot of the engineering and all this kind of stuff, like you wouldn't think that something like this would be built all the way back. I mean, all the way back then. It's not. I guess it's not that long ago, but it's coming up. It's like 80 years ago.
This is 80 years ago, exactly. Yeah, it's an insanely complex machine.
Yeah.
There are over 1,000 electric motors alone just to power various moving parts on the ship.
Yeah, that's insane. Okay, so then you said as soon as it was done being built, it was put to work like almost immediately in World War II, obviously. So like what were some of the, and we also mentioned that the Battleship New Jersey has been in the most battles out of any battleship or
Any battleship ever built.
Okay.
So specifically battleships, there are a few other types of ships that have more battle stars than us. But New Jersey was in 19 separate battles that she earned awards for.
Yeah.
Through World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Lebanese Civil War, and then some actions in the Persian Gulf.
Wow. Yeah, and that's, I mean, especially something that's built, like we talked about just before, something that's built in like 1943 to have that longevity and like the engineering and all the stuff that kind of goes into it, and to be in battles.
Yes.
Like that's another big thing, like we're leaving out. The fact that it's in battles for, what is that, another 40 years about?
Yeah, almost 50 years.
Yeah, almost 50 years.
Positioned until 1991.
That's like, to me, that's like mind blowing that something like this can kind of stand the test of time. But I think it goes to just like, good old fashioned back in the day American ingenuity, and like, especially at that time, like knowing what they needed to do, like what was like this daunting thing that was kind of hanging over their heads, like it was eventually going to come, that they needed to kind of get ready for.
Exactly. And she was built to shoot it out with enemy battleships. So she was supposed to take shell hits from guns the size of her own. And so they overbuilt everything so she could take those hits and shrug them off and keep fighting.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. So what were some of the earlier battles, I guess, like World War II? Like what are some skirmishes and different things that she's getting herself into kind of in the war?
So her very first engagement is the attack on Troop Lagoon. And that is also the only engagement she actually did what she was designed to, which is shoot it out with Japanese surface warships.
Okay.
So she sank a Japanese trawler and a Japanese destroyer. The Americans launched an air raid on Troop Lagoon. It was it's sometimes referred to as the Japanese version of Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
So this was the flagship of Admiral Spruance, who commanded the raid. And the carrier aircraft sank most of the ships there. But a couple of small ships that survived start to break out. So that's when Spruance, since this is his flagship, he's originally a cruiser commander. He's not a carrier commander.
Right.
So he has a couple of the surface warships line up behind New Jersey and basically sails them to the mouth of the anchorage and just shoots these fish in the barrel as they're trying to escape.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. And it's just like, it's also crazy to me too, like, like right out of the gate, like it's not like there's no testing really, I guess. I mean, I guess there was testing, but just like almost immediately it's involved in these battles and all that kind of stuff. And then like how many more over the course of World War II does she get involved in?
8 more.
Wow.
Including the Battle of Leyte Gulf, which is the largest naval battle in history. Again, she was the flagship, this time, of Admiral William Halsey, a New Jersey native himself.
Yeah.
Which is probably why he selected this ship. And so this was her flag. It's one of the cool things about this ship as a museum.
Yeah.
When you come on board, when you come into a space like this, the officer's wardrobe, Halsey would have been in here. Like, we've got pictures of him walking around the ship, and you get to literally stand where he stood when he made some of the most critical decisions of World War II.
Yeah, it's got to be, like, I mean, so we're here in the wardroom, like you mentioned, but we've been on the deck, we've been in the captain's quarters, right? We've been in the admiral's quarters. To me, like, I was standing outside and it has one of those machine guns, like the belt-fed machine guns, and like, I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this, but just to me, like standing on the deck, shooting that gun, like in a bat, like that's almost, you know, obviously like there's, you know, admirals and like captains and all that kind of stuff. And, but just like being just a sailor on a ship like this during a battle, like to me, like that's what adds to the coolness. I know that's like a really just degrading way to kind of talk about it, but just like you feel that almost, because it's got to be like insane to be, I mean, it's insane just to be on the deck as not a sailor, but then to be like out in a battle and shooting it out with other battleships and all that kind of stuff.
It's all inspiring. Like every morning for the last 6 years, I keep thinking this is going to wear off one day. I park my car out there and I'm walking up and the ship just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
As you come towards her, you get on board and you can feel that you're a part of the history of this thing.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so World War II, were there any, like, was the largest one, I guess that's the most significant battle that she was in, correct? So then after the end of World War II, like what happens to a battleship at the end of a world war? Like, does it be like, hey, like, let's just keep it here just in case we need it, you know, again? And where, like most of the time was, like, where did she make berth? That's a pretty good sailing term, right?
Yeah.
Like, where she docked?
So during most of World War II, she would have been, really, she was forward deployed the whole time.
Okay.
Like floating dry docks and stuff like that. She didn't have a quote-unquote home port.
Yeah.
In the 1950s, she was home ported primarily in Norfolk, Virginia. And then in the 60s and 80s, she was in Long Beach.
Okay, cool.
So a bunch of major naval bases.
Yeah, for sure. And then when it's time to, so I guess the next war would be the Vietnam War, right?
Korea.
Sorry, I forgot about that one. So, so World War II to Korea was like 1950.
50 to 55.
Yeah, so it has like a little bit of lag time between the end of World War II and the beginning of the Korean War, and so like, what happens to a ship like this? I think that was kind of like where I also was thinking my question was going to go before, but I didn't ask it. After a World War, before the Korean War, like, are they saying like, okay, these things worked really well on this ship during this time, like maybe we should build something else, or let's like make some updates? Like, what happens in that in those, I guess, 7 years between those two wars to a ship like this?
Because normally older battleships, those were the backbone of the fleet. They were always maintained. At the end of World War II, not only have we been surpassed by carrier aircraft, but people legitimately thought that we were never going to get into a war again because of nuclear weapons.
Sure.
And so the brand new Air Force has the monopoly on delivering nuclear weapons. So the Navy is severely downsized post-war.
Yeah.
And this is one of the biggest ships. It's one of the most expensive to operate. In the 1980s, at the end of her career, it cost about $1 million a day to operate this ship.
Wow.
Just as a museum, it costs about $10,000 a day for us to come in, turn the lights on, put air conditioning on, have a couple of tour guides here.
Yeah.
Like, so it's ridiculously expensive to maintain one of these. So unfortunately, she was one of the ships that gets decommissioned after the war.
Okay.
Now, we weren't building new battleships. So this was the best that it ever got in the U.S. Navy.
Gotcha.
So rather than...
Even to this day?
To this day.
Wow.
So they didn't scrap her like happened to so many other ships World War II. They did what's called putting her in mothballs, which essentially the crew comes off, anything perishable comes off, and you seal all the doors and put dehumidifiers inside so it won't rust anymore.
Yeah.
And then the next time you need the ship, you send the crew on board, you load it with perishables, and you update any new systems that need to be updated, you get her back out there. So when the Korean War starts, which is also more or less the beginning of the Cold War, the Navy decides, all right, we need to bring this back. We've now got wartime funding again, so they reactivate her again. Fortunately, it wasn't that long since World War II, so they didn't have to do any major updates
Yeah.
at that time.
Right.
Those will come later.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the Korean War, how many battles was she in there?
Let's see. It was 5, I believe.
Okay.
Major engagement.
And so I would imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, like most of the major battles that she saw were during World War II. Is that correct? Or was it...
She saw the most battles. Of her 19 battle stars, it was 9 during World War II.
Okay.
And then...
But they were like the most significant, I would imagine, like the largest ones, or was it more kind of like, I mean, this is a very, I'm really tapping into your knowledge of this stuff. Because I'm just curious, because it's like, you know, obviously it was built for a specific time period, almost a specific war to a degree.
Yeah.
And then obviously like the Korean Wars was different. The Vietnam War was a lot different. And all the stuff that kind of follows is different than what what World War II, as much as my knowledge can give me. I think like it would be a lot different. So almost the way that it's used kind of would be a little bit different too, right?
Exactly. She's designed to slug it out with enemy surface ships.
Yeah.
She does that her first day on the job and then never again.
Right.
Because aircraft and submarines can sink enemy surface ships much easier.
Yeah.
And really, the various communist powers, the Vietnams, the Koreas, they didn't have large navies to come out and oppose the U.S. Navy, the largest navy in the world.
Yeah.
So this ship wasn't doing that job.
Yeah.
What she could do very well is deliver ordnance inland.
Okay.
So we do that with carrier aircraft also, but you can shoot down a carrier aircraft.
Right.
The carrier aircraft can't fly if it's too rainy or if there's too much anti-aircraft fire. You can't shoot down a 16-inch shell.
Yeah.
And we can fire our shells over 20 miles inland.
Wow.
And most cities are within 20 miles of the ocean.
Yeah.
Something like 70% of the world's population is within 20 miles of the ocean.
Right.
So this ship, wherever the Marines, the Army are going to be fighting over a place, this ship could just sit off the coast, completely unchallenged by enemy aircraft or ships, because they've got nothing that can damage us.
Yeah.
And just lob 1-ton projectiles 20 miles inland.
I mean, I would imagine, like, as you're talking about that and just, like, being on the ship and even just seeing, like, the one side and just, like, the minimal that I've been able to walk through, but even just looking at the model behind us, like, I would imagine if this is, you know, sitting out there, like, just an intimidation factor alone is like, oh, my God, like, this thing's a beast.
And that's largely what she was used for in the later Cold War.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a hot spot in the world, you send the battleship there. Carriers might be the dominant force at this point.
Yeah.
But the carrier's 500 miles out to sea. You don't know that the United States has taken an interest in your domestic situation. When this battleship comes and drops its anchor,
Yeah, 20 miles away.
Nothing that can hit it.
Yeah, right.
You know that the United States is here for you.
Yeah, for sure. So we can kind of expand on that just a little bit more. So we're talking about like the intimidation factor. We're talking about just like the guns that are on the ship. We're talking about, you know, how certain cannons can fire 20 miles, like a 1-ton projectile 20 miles inland or 20 miles wherever. What can we talk about, like just what the weapons are on this battleship and like you know, what they do? Like I said, aside from shoot shit down.
Yeah, so really we've got 2 different kinds of weapons. We've got anti-aircraft weapons and anti-surface weapons. The anti-aircraft weapons come in 3 different flavors primarily. We've got 5-inch guns that shoot a 55-pound projectile up to 22 per minute, and they can engage aerial targets up to 9 miles away.
Wow.
And then planes make it through that barrage. We've got 40-millimeter guns as built, up to 80 of them. There are 120 2-pound projectiles per minute.
Yeah.
Per barrel.
Right.
And then you get down to the 20-millimeter guns. We had around 50 of them during World War II. And they're like, you get within 2 or 3 miles of the ship that these are just anywhere there's flat open deck space, they've bolted them down and you just have guys shooting these machine guns at them.
Yeah.
But that's just the defensive armament.
Right.
For fighting an enemy battleship or shore bombardment, you've got the 9 16-inch 50 caliber guns. So they are firing two types of projectiles. The 1,900-pound high-capacity round, those explode as soon as they hit a target. So you use that against an unarmored target.
Yeah.
And the 2,700-pound, 6-foot-tall, armor-piercing projectile. So that's what you use. You're firing at a reinforced bunker. You're firing at an enemy battleship.
Yeah.
It'll punch through about 30 inches of reinforced concrete. It'll punch through about 16 inches of armor plate. And then it won't explode until it's punched through where
Yeah.
it do the maximum damage.
Wow.
It takes 660 pounds of propellant to fire that, and its maximum range is about 23 miles.
That's pretty crazy.
And there's a very early analog computer that makes those guns accurate at 23 miles, which is the really impressive thing about the
Yeah.
power control system.
Yeah, that's like kind of like what we were talking about before. Like, you know, you said certain updates and like all that kind of stuff from, you know, like in 1940, they didn't have the computers. They really didn't have any kind of computer, I would imagine. Like, it's like different analog type things like you mentioned, but even just getting into like the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of technology comes out in like that 40-year period.
But even in the 90s, they looked at replacing the fire control system with a modern digital computer, and they decided, yeah, the digital computer is as accurate, but it's not more accurate, so we're not going to spend the money.
Yeah.
So they continued to use that Great Depression era, 1938 designed analog computer
So crazy.
into the 1990s.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just have a question just because I was standing under them and I was very impressed. So these guns up front, which ones are the ones, like you were telling me all the guns, which ones are those? Because those are like, they make me like dizzy, like looking up at them because they're so big. And it's just crazy to think like, imagine that shooting something.
Yeah, those are the 16-inch guns.
Okay.
Ones we'd fire at other surface targets
Gotcha.
primarily.
Gotcha. Yeah, because that's pretty wild. But okay, so let's take us a little bit more into like, you know, Vietnam, and you said which was the other battle or war that she was in?
The Lebanese Civil War.
Lebanese Civil War. So I would imagine that, you know, as wars and, you know, the style of war and like all that kind of stuff is changing, as we talked about before, like what she's used for kind of also evolves a little bit and all that kind of stuff. So were there like, I mean, obviously if you're using a battleship of this size and caliber, it's significant. But were there like significant moments that she had, you know, kind of later in her working life, I guess?
Absolutely. We thought the ship today looks like it would have looked in the 1990s, not
Okay.
like it would have looked in World War II.
Gotcha.
Because the museum has decided that each of her various commissions, each of the battles she fought in, was equivalently historically significant.
Right.
And unfortunately, we don't have any World War II guys coming back to visit us.
Right.
But the guys who served in the 80s and 90s, they're just starting to hit retirement age, and they're coming back, and they want to see their spaces.
Yeah.
We very intentionally chose not to backdate parts of the ship, delete original material, and replace it with like facsimile Hollywood sets.
Sure. Yeah.
But
And you could tell that too, I think, as you walk through here. You could tell that it's legit.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, I certainly get that impression.
Yeah.
I'm glad you do too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just like, I don't know, I think a lot of that's important. I like the fact that you guys did that because obviously, like, I'm sure there's things here that are the same as what they were during World War II because it's so big that, like, you're not going to change it that much in, like, a couple year span between wars and, like, all that kind of stuff. But then just, like, the little nuanced things, you kind of get a flavor and a piece of, like, each era that it kind of served in. And I think like that's really interesting. And I think if you were to take out a lot of that stuff and make it be like, hey, look at this old thing. And you're like, that's made of plastic. Like, I know it's not real, you know, like, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure this wasn't here, but I like this edition because you get to see like the whole thing. It's just like a cool way to kind of like we were talking about before, like feel, like you said, you feel it every day when you come here, like me just walking out here for the first time, you know, that like what people would have felt like if they were actually in a battle, you know, on a ship like this. Obviously, like, we're safer. But, you know, like that, to me, it definitely shines through for sure.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so before we take our break, which we'll come back and talk about just kind of like what people can interact with when they're here and then kind of future plans for the ship. Can we, because this is a New Jersey-based podcast, obviously, and we do a lot of Jersey stuff. Well, we only do Jersey stuff. Can we talk about why it's called the New Jersey?
Yeah.
Is there a reason why? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Almost all American battleships are named after states.
Right.
They tend to name them in a hierarchy. So during World War II, smaller types of ships were named after cities, and then smaller ships than that were named after people.
Okay.
So your largest assets, you're naming after your biggest areas.
Right.
And also you tend to name these after areas that have a lot of votes or have a lot of production power. So New Jersey was a huge shipbuilding center during World War II. Right here, basically where the museum sits, used to be, it was called New York Shipbuilding.
Okay.
Because they tried to open it in New York. They copyrighted that name, and they couldn't find space there. So New York Shipbuilding was right here in Camden, New Jersey.
Not even
basically
close.
right where the Battleship is sitting nowadays.
Yeah.
And they built all sorts of ships. The Battleship South Dakota, the cruiser Indianapolis, which is real famous.
Wow.
Independence-class carriers. So the places like this, they're really contributing to the war effort, tend to get the ships named after.
So it was almost kind of, maybe not a coincidence, but kind of like, New Jersey's up. Like, let's go with New Jersey for this one.
Yes, and the even more specifically why this ship.
Yeah.
The Secretary of the Navy at the time, Charles Edison, was a New Jersey native.
Okay.
So he probably jumped the order a few to scratch out maybe Montana, put New Jersey in.
Right. Not a lot of ships in Montana, I would imagine. Yeah.
And then he becomes the governor of New Jersey when the ship is laid down.
Okay, gotcha.
So he's there throughout all the major milestones of this vessel.
Yeah, so he has a very deep connection to this particular ship. That's so cool, and I love that it's like seen the most battles and like all that kind of stuff because it's very Jersey. Like we're just the tough people.
Exactly.
Awesome. No, I love that. So we're gonna take our break. We'll be back. So this is the Greetings from the Garden State podcast. I'm Mike Cam. We're here in Camden, New Jersey, on the Battleship New Jersey with Ryan Szimanski. We'll be right back.
The Mayo Performing Arts Center is the heart of arts and entertainment in Morristown, New Jersey. MPAC presents over 200 events annually and is home to an innovative children's arts education program. To see MPAC's upcoming schedule of world-class concerts, stand-up comedy, family shows, and more, head to mayoarts.org or just click the link in our show notes.
Want to give your guests something they'll talk about for years? OMG Tarot delivers spot-on tarot card readings that will make your next birthday party, holiday party, team lunch, or girls' night unforgettable. To learn more, visit omgtarot.com.
I wanted to tell you about the crew over at Make Cool Shit. These are the magicians who recently gave our podcast a jaw-dropping makeover and shares our same Garden State attitude. Whether you're a fresh-faced startup or a seasoned business looking to shake things up, it's all about making your brand sizzle. We're not just talking about design, we're talking about a partnership in creating awesomeness, and I can promise you they can make that happen. Plus, their unlimited Cool Shit design subscription is a game changer. Unlimited creativity, one flat monthly fee, and none of that boring stuff. It's like having your own design superheroes on speed dial. Check them out on Instagram at WeMakeCoolShit or visit their website, WeMakeCoolShit.co. We're so happy to announce our brand new partnership with the New Jersey Lottery. As their slogan goes, anything can happen in Jersey, and that is so true. Welcome to Greetings from the Garden State, powered by the New Jersey Lottery.
All right, we're back for segment 2 of this episode of Greetings from the Garden State. I'm Mike Cam. We're here with Ryan Szimanski on the Battleship New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey. So the first segment we got, probably not the whole history, but we got a pretty good amount of history. I do want to talk about, there is a plaque, before we get into kind of like what people can do when they come visit here. There is a plaque out on, what's the deck that I was standing on? What's that called? The quarter?
The main deck.
Main deck. So there is a plaque out there because we mentioned 19 battles. And what I found interesting reading this plaque was there was only one casualty on this ship. Can we talk about him? I think that's important too, just to make sure that we're telling like the whole history of it, because that's a significant thing.
So we are aware of multiple deaths on the ship and many crew members who died off of this ship. The most dangerous thing you could do as a crew member of this ship, get into a car on liberty without a seatbelt on.
Okay.
Most of our crew who died while assigned to the ship died in drunk driving accidents while they weren't on board the ship.
Yeah.
You were twice as likely to die there than die working on the ship. And something like 12 times as likely as if you died in combat. So wear your seatbelt, kids. That's your PSA for the day.
There you go. Start that one off with a good tip.
Seaman Robert Osterwin served on board the ship during the Korean War.
Okay.
And during the Korean War, we were doing shore bombardment of North Korea. And there was a North Korean battery, gun battery, in the mountains overlooking the harbor where the ship was. And they started firing. They were approximately 6-inch diameter projectiles, so less than a third the size of our main battery. Can't defeat the ship's armor.
Yeah.
However, some of the old World War II anti-aircraft guns, which are just exposed on deck, were still there, and that was Seaman Osterwind's battle station.
Gotcha.
So shots start landing near the ship. The captain sounds general quarters. The crew runs on deck to go man these guns, and a shell hits turret number 1. And turret number 1 resists the shell. You cannot even see any evidence of the damage.
Yeah.
But the shell breaks apart when it hits and causes shrapnel. And the shrapnel catches 4 sailors. 3 of them they're able to get most likely right here to this table. This is a battle dressing station because in combat, the officers aren't going to be in here eating. Notice the medical lamp overhead.
Oh, wow.
So they were most likely brought right here and treated. And Seaman Osterwind took a piece of shrapnel through his chest and did not survive.
Wow. That's, crazy. Yeah, it's just like I think like we were talking about before in the first segment, like knowing that story and then being able to stand like out there. I think it gives you like a real appreciation for like what these sailors and like everyone involved on the ship at that time or any time really throughout its history had to go through, because I think like it's a significant thing. It could be big and menacing looking and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, it's just like people are running it and working it and fighting on it, really. So I think that's really interesting. I'm glad we talked about that. Okay, I talked a little bit about kind of some of the stuff that I've seen so far on the ship. But when people do want to come and visit, like they can do a self-guided tour, right, or a guided tour, I think, too, because we saw one of those going through. Take me through that. Like, what are some things that people can see? What are some interesting things people like to do? Talk to me a little bit about that kind of
so we got all sorts of options. You can come on board and do an event here if you want to have your business or a wedding or a retirement ceremony, something like that.
I'm going to jot that down, Ryan. That'd be so cool to do an event here.
We've got guided tours. You got a group of 10 or 20 people or a school class or something like that. You can set up a guided tour. You can do it overnight. We have up to 300 scouts a night sometimes during the year.
Wow.
Spending the night on board. They eat food. They do the tour of the ship. They sleep in the original beds. And then, of course, there's the self-guided tour, which is what most of our guests do. You just show up. You don't have to book anything or announce yourself. You show up during our normal business hours, and you can buy a ticket right here same day and go on board.
Yeah. And what are some things, like, so we're here in the wardroom. We mentioned the captain's quarters, the admiral quarters. Obviously, you can walk around on the deck. What are some of the other things that maybe I haven't seen yet that people can kind of like see, interact with a little bit? Because I'm going to wind up seeing all of it by the time I leave. I will not leave without that. But talk to me a little bit about that.
Our tour route is 1.5 miles long if you do the whole thing.
Wow.
We've got it broken down in a couple different routes if you're like, well, I can't do that much.
Yeah.
But the large thing we want you to see is the living spaces. How did the greatest generation live when they were on this ship in World War II? Or the guys in Korea, Vietnam, the 80s. How did they live on here? Because one day they're all going to be gone.
Yeah.
But this ship will still be here, and there'll be our connection to them and what they did.
Yeah.
So things like where they ate, where they slept. You've seen some of the officers' cabins, like the captain and admirals.
Right.
It's very different than the bunk beds with 100 in a room that the enlisted guys were sleeping in.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's good to see both of those, and it certainly gives you a sense, even without us having to put up a display sign or something, you start to realize what the hierarchy of the ship is.
Yeah.
How important someone is based on how many roommates they have.
Exactly. Which is still sometimes true to this day. But because like this area, like where the officers would eat, it's nice. Like, this wouldn't be too bad if you were on a battleship, like eating through here. But I would imagine it's different, in other parts of the ship for like the enlisted crew.
Yeah, the enlisted guys, it looks like the largest McDonald's dining room you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And they're going down a serving line, and it's like your grade school cafeteria. There's a lunch lady back there. In this case, it's an 18-year-old sailor.
Yeah.
Just like throwing whatever slap on your tray.
Right.
Whereas here in the officer's wardroom, we're sitting at the head table where the executive officer and the department heads would have sat, and we would have had stewards with like white linen on their arms delivering plated food.
That's pretty crazy. And then so I've also seen on the ship's Instagram, which is Battleship NJ, right? Mm-hmm. There's a plug right there. I'm glad I got it right. So on the ship's Instagram, you can fire one of the guns. Is that true?
Yes. So one thing you get to see here is the living experience. Another thing you get to see here is the weapons. That's
Sure.
what most people come here to see.
Yeah, of course.
So you can go inside a 16-inch gun. for an extra donation, assuming our gun crew is on board at that time. And we usually try to post that, hey, this Saturday, we're going to have some gun crew guys on board.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be. We will fire either a 40 millimeter saluting gun or one of the ship's 5-inch secondary battery guns.
And so those are like that's got to be like a cool experience for people, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what it's just like, I would imagine it's like a blank round. Like, how does that work?
Correct.
Yeah. Obviously not like anything live.
For example, the 5-inch gun would have originally fired a 15-pound powder charge.
Okay.
When we first reactivated it, we tried with all right, let's try a 5-inch powder charge. And we broke one of the windows in our visitor center because it was such a big concussion. So we only do 2 pounds of powder out of that now to try. There's a lot of glass here in the Camden, Philadelphia area.
Yeah. Also, I think it's also important because you talked about like the visitor center, and obviously like you're here with me, you work here. I talked about some of the people that I interacted with up on the main deck. Are the people that work here, are they volunteers? Are they employees? Like, how does that work? I'm assuming it's maybe like a mix. I don't know why I'm assuming that, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. When the ship was in service, she would have had anywhere from 1,600 crew members at the low end in the 90s.
Wow.
All the way up to 2,700 crew members during World War II. So the Navy really threw a lot of manpower at these ships. Right now, we have, I would say, about 20, maybe 25 full-time staff, and probably about 60 or so part-time staff, the paid positions. Tour guides, security, curators, accountants, like you name it.
Right.
And then we've got, I would say, about 200 volunteers who are active on a monthly basis who come in and help with the maintenance things. Because normally, our maintenance staff is about 3 or 4 guys doing the job of 2,700.
Seriously.
So the volunteers are our huge force multiplier there.
Right. Absolutely. And can we also talk about how and why the ship is in Camden? Obviously, like, it was built very close to here. I'm sure that has something to do with it too. But I heard that there was like other places that were vying to kind of get it to like in Hackensack or different places, and how like other places were like, we don't want it in Hackensack and all that kind of stuff. So why Camden? Like, why here?
That's a good question. The ship was decommissioned for the last time in 1991, and she's kept in mothballs. The Navy thought, hey, we might get into another war. We might need her again.
Yeah.
And in 1999, they decided that, all right, at this point, she is 60 years old. We better hope we never need her again.
Yeah, seriously.
So they decided they were going to put her up for what they call donation status. And that's one of several ways that the Navy has to dispose of former warships. And honestly, it's probably the cheapest way they have, because scrapping it, you've got to remediate all sorts of hazardous materials that might have been used in it.
Yeah.
Likewise, if you're going to use it in a sinking exercise, fire weapons at it, test how well they do. Again, you've got to remediate it before you put that into the ocean.
Yeah.
So they decided she's historically significant enough that she will be a museum ship. But because she is the Battleship New Jersey, she has to be put in the territorial waters of New Jersey.
Gotcha.
So several organizations popped up to try and take the ship. She ends up here in Camden, and part of the reason she ends up here is right next to where she's born. The big campaign slogan was birthplace to birthplace.
Yeah.
So birthplace where she was born,
sure.
Birthplace where she is docked now.
Yeah.
And the other major reason is the Navy required a really significant application to show how she is. And part of that application process is how much do other local places want us?
Yeah.
So, for example, Camden really wanted us as part of their revitalization efforts here on the waterfront. They wanted the visitation we were going to bring to the area is part of their efforts to turn the town around ever since New York Ship got closed down.
Yeah.
And across the river in Philadelphia, they also wanted us as an additional tourist attraction because they have some museum ships over there at Independence Seaport Museum.
Okay.
And people don't come to the Philadelphia area for Spanish-American War era ship or World War II era submarine. They come to see Revolutionary War era stuff.
Right.
So their big hope was you put another World War II era ship here, a big one, and it'll draw more people. And of course, if you're here to see New Jersey, you're going to go across the river and see the other ships too.
Yeah, for sure.
So they thought there was a lot of synergy here. The other major area that submitted a really good application that really made the Navy choose between the two was a group up in North Jersey that was looking to put her around the Bayonne area or Liberty State Park. And up there, you start to compete with the New York City tourism.
Sure.
And New York City has the aircraft carrier Intrepid.
Right.
And she gets a ton, like somewhere around like 1 million visitors, and they didn't want another capital ship like this.
Yeah, taking
Into their name.
visitors.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That now they don't have enough money to maintain their operations. The birthplaces they were looking at putting the ship up there, the berths were not deep enough.
Okay.
An Iowa-class battleship control up to 38 feet of water, fully loaded. And so they were going to have to blast a berth into the bedrock that could take her.
Yeah.
It's the same bedrock that the Statue of Liberty sits on.
Right.
So now you're looking at all sorts of extra money and engineer studies and whatnot. Whereas here, the river's already dredged to 40 or 45 feet, depending on where you are, and it's just silt here on the Delaware River. Plus, something they didn't consider but turned out to be a huge benefit, this far up the Delaware River, we're sitting in fresh water.
Okay.
Which is much better for the long-term preservation of steel.
Okay, cool.
As opposed to the salt water you get closer to the sea.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Like it would have been at Liberty State Park or Bayonne.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. It's just, a serendipitous kind of thing. So we're talking about all this stuff, and I think it's all amazing. I forgot what my other question was going to be. Damn it. I'm going to edit this part out. Okay, so all right, there we go. So you mentioned the fresh water is better for preservation and like all that kind of stuff. But what are some like future plans for the ship? Is it going to stay here for a long period of time? Like kind of like what's because eventually like it's just terrible. But like it's going to get older and older and all that kind of stuff. But you want to make it preserve it for the longest that you possibly can. So take me through that a little bit, like what the plans are for that.
Yeah, so the museum operates the ship in the public trust, which means preserving it as long as humanly possible so that as many people from the public can come on board and experience what this crew experienced throughout their career. And because not all ships are saved, they're not just experiencing what life was like on this ship, they get to experience what life was like for their grandfather on their ship during World War II, which probably was scrapped.
Yeah.
So major projects we have going on. Right now, we're replacing the ship's teak deck. It was pretty badly rotten, and there's 43,000 square feet of it. So that's a $5 million project. But we're getting to the end of that, and we're looking at what's next. The Navy recommends that a ship like this gets dry docked every 20 years.
Okay.
The museum's never done that. The last time she was dry docked was in 1990 when she was still in naval service. So it's been 33 years since we've been out of the water. And thankfully, like we talked about before, we're sitting in fresh water. So that has helped with our long-term preservation. But we're not going to tempt fate on that any longer. We've started fundraising to put the ship into dry dock. And this is the coolest part. The dry dock number 3 at the Philadelphia Navy Yard is where we were completed.
Right.
And it's where we were reactivated in 1968 for the Vietnam War.
Cool.
They're still in operation. That's where we're going to try and go when we dry dock the ship sometime in 2024, hopefully early 2024.
Yeah. That's got to be like such a undertaking to dry dock a ship of this size. I would imagine that's one of the reasons why you haven't done it. But like, I mean, just to get it from here just across the river, I would imagine is going to be like such a big undertaking.
We're looking at approximately $10 million for this project.
Yeah.
And the state in this year's budget has given us $5 million. So we're halfway there thanks to their support. And that's why we can now look at it and say, okay, we are at a point where we can do this.
Right. And mostly just towed over here, I would imagine, right? Like not actually like we're not driving the boat over there. And like to get it up onto the dry dock, like that's just, to me, like, looking at this, being on the ship and just being like, how does this get out of the water? How to get in the water? But like that to me is just an incredible kind of like engineering type of thing. So, yeah.
Well, we'll get you back on board next year after it's done, and we'll talk through the whole process and what happened and what problems we found.
I'll come back. I don't come to Camden enough. I'm gonna do like get a cheesesteak after this. I got a whole plan.
You going to Donkeys?
Of course. Yeah. I just did Donkeys actually a couple months ago, and it was like my first experience there. So I was like, definitely going back. And then my girlfriend was like, you better bring me a Donkey's cheesesteak back too. So I have a laundry list of things that I have to do for the rest of the day. But this is so cool. And so I really appreciate you giving me, a little bit of your time today and talking about the ship and all that kind of stuff. So if people want to learn more, if they want to donate, if they want to get involved with all that kind of stuff, because we're talking about all these different capital projects that, help preserve an important piece of U.S. history. What are some places that they can go? What are some ways that they can do that? Take me through that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so if you go to battleshipnewjersey.org, that's where you can buy your tickets to take the tour. If you want to buy tickets ahead of time, it's got all the contact information. If you want to book a group tour on overnight, something like that. There's a donate link there if you want to support us. We're very active on social media, so if you go on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and search Battleship New Jersey, we come up all over the place.
Yeah, awesome. That's so cool. So Ryan, again, thank you so much for doing this with us today and giving us a little peek into the Battleship New Jersey's history. And I'm so excited to be here. Like, I can't wait to walk around a little bit more after we're done.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for coming out today.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everybody listening, I'll make sure that I put all of the Battleship New Jersey's contact info, website, social handles in the show notes. You can just go click it. Next time you're down this way, come visit. Buy a ticket, come visit, then go get a cheesesteak at Donkey's when you're done, like I'm about to do. So the Battleships links will be in the show notes, along with greetingsfromtheGardenState.com will also be in the show notes, so you can check out all of our other episodes that we've done so far over, at this point, 2 years. When this episode posts, we'll be doing the show for 2 years, which is kind of crazy. So again, we were at the Battleship New Jersey in Camden, New Jersey with Ryan Szimanski. I'm Mike Ham. This has been the Greetings from the Garden State podcast. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.